This program is part of the Infinite Potato Alliance. Visit us at infinitepotato.com.
I'm Shane Thomas, and this is Analysing Doctor Who. I'm joined by Rick Tetrault and Jonathan Wilkinson, and we are here to analyse the most recent episode of Doctor Who, Boom. If you have any thoughts on what we're about to hear, or anything else Doctor Who based, you can email us at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com. So if we just start with the episode rating out of 10, what do you give this out of 10, Rick?
A 7.
Okay, Jonathan?
9.
I'm also giving it a 7. Jonathan, what from this did you like the most?
I like the return of tension in a Doctor Who episode. Like, just generally running out. Obviously, the premise is he's on the landmine. He didn't have his magic wand with him, and there was a lot of high tension going on, and I can't remember the last time I actually watched a Doctor Who episode thinking that emotion. So, yeah, well done, Stephen Moffat, for bringing the tension back to Doctor Who. It was just serious, wasn't it? Tense and not silly. Well, it was silly, but in a different way.
You actually a magic wand. It kind of, maybe it's now more... I know, magic mouse. It looks more like a mouse now, doesn't it?
Or an ocarina or something.
Yes. I haven't seen much of it, though, have we?
Not a lot. You're thinking how much we've seen it? I mean, maybe the most was a Christmas episode.
They stuck it into something during the Devil's Court. I don't remember what.
Yeah, and in fact, Space Baby as well, in the spaceship to kind of sync everything up.
Yeah.
Almost like an all-purpose, like USB.
Yeah, but it's not been used at the end of an episode to magically cure everything.
No, it hasn't been used as a Deus Ex Sonic. At least not yet. Rick, what from this you like the most?
I liked Ruby a lot in this episode. I have to say, while I give this one high marks, I can't say I enjoyed it, and we can talk about the details of why later. But the ray of sunshine in this episode was Ruby, and just her, especially when she just totally told the Doctor off. You know, usually it takes a little while before the companions start giving him that kind of crap, and she's just jumping right in there, not taking his shit, which I really appreciated.
Trying not to show off. Throw it to me.
No.
Throw it to my right hand. I need to use it to counterbalance. I'm going to catch it at the exact moment I put my left foot down on the ground.
I understand, but it's too unstable. Let me give it to you.
No.
You'll have a much better chance if I just put it in your hand.
If it goes wrong, you will be caught in the blast.
So let's get it right then.
Ruby, I forbid this.
Yeah, good luck with that.
You don't understand. This is a smart mind. It is monitoring anything. Any significant change, I get too worried about you and my blood pressure goes up. And I don't know how much leeway I have.
Best not to worry then. So how are we going to do this? Count of 3?
Please listen to me.
No arguing, Doctor. Blood pressure.
Yeah, what I think I like the most from this, it's the scene when, and I think it actually crosses over with the moment you're talking about, Rick. The scene when Ruby has what is the dead body of John Francis Veta, the guy who dies in the pre-credit sequence. The moment where it's like, okay, sing your song, count of 3, no, do it on this word. And as the Doctor starts to sing the song and Ruby clicks her fingers in rhythm. That scene and how it was put together, if you go and watch the scene back, you'll see as it's happening, the sharp cutting between like Ruby's face, the Doctor's face, Ruby clicking her fingers, Veta's dead cylindrical body, Ruby, the Doctor, clicking fingers, faster, faster, faster. It had the dimensions of that scene in a film where someone's trying to defuse the bomb with only like seconds left before it goes off. Or when Indy gets the idol at the start of Raiders of the Lost Ark. The moment when the tension of a tense episode, when the tension felt was at its height and when I was most engaged. The most, no one's breathing at this moment. And Rick, we come to you on what from the episode you liked the least?
The cruelty of this entire episode, especially after coming out of 2 extremely silly episodes. After the first 2 premiered, and I think it may have been Jan who said this online, apparently people were really bitching quite loudly about the first 2 episodes and had to be reminded that Doctor Who is at its heart a kids show, which I was like, all right, but if you're going to get that far into being, going back down to, younger kids shows, please give us some warning. And then this episode just came out of the darkest pages of the Doctor and just absolutely nailed us right in the emotional grundies. I give this episode high marks. It was very well done. Everybody did a great job in it. It just was so harsh and bleak and painful that I can't say I enjoyed it.
The tonal whiplash, which is something I was actually expecting given the trailer and the fact that it's a Moffat compared to the last the last 5 Davis episodes.
Yeah, if including the specials, that's 5. No, 6.
Yeah.
Christmas as well.
Yeah, I was like, there's going to be a massive whiplash here. Maybe should have placed something in between this and the other two, just to edge it back up there a little bit.
And also, Rick, not trying to disprove your opinion, it's your opinion, but to drill down on it, is part of the reason you felt the way you felt partly because, as Jonathan, it's the way they positioned this episode in the series, where if this had maybe come later, it wouldn't have been as acidic.
Maybe. I mean, there are also some personal triggers of mine in this episode. 2 big ones.
One of the reasons I'm actually glad to have you on, because you are the resident girl dad on the show today, which definitely is a running theme in this episode.
Yeah, the whole thing with first of all, why the hell did he bring his daughter into a war zone? I have a big problem with, I don't know if I've said this on this show before. I don't think I've had cause to. My father died when I was 14, and so dead father episodes, depending on how they're done, like with the Donna Noble, when her, am I remembering right? Her dad died?
Because it was her dad, and then her dad was, the actor was ill, terminally ill for real. That's where Wilfred comes in to basically fulfill that role. That would have always been Donna's, is it Jeff? Donna's dad would have basically been Wilfred in the show. He's in The Runaway Bride, and they had planned to bring him back for Donna's series, series 4. And I think he was even at read-throughs, but he just got really ill, so they had to kind of readjust on the fly, and they was like, oh, hold on, what if she has a granddad? Well, that was real-world stuff intervening.
Yeah.
But yes, in the show, they did have the character die.
Didn't Donna, the Doctor took her back and she got to say goodbye or something? It was either Donna or maybe it was Rose.
In the very first series, there's Rose goes back.
That's right, it's Rose, yeah.
Yeah, the church gets attacked by
the Father's Day episode, yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, that kind of stuff can either just make me very weepy, and like that did, whichever example I'm trying to remember, and I just get a tissue after the episode's over and I'm good. Or like this one, which was deservedly so. I think it was portrayed the way for the message it was telling. It was like a serrated knife to the chest. And so that and putting children in danger are 2 of the biggest things I have trouble coping with depending on how they're done. And both of them were done so raw and so bleakly. So that's where I'm at on this one. It was just really well done. Maybe if there had been some buffer, slightly less silly but slightly more serious episodes in between, it might have deadened the pain a little bit for me, but I don't think it would have been that much.
Well, that itself was an interesting point, because you're not saying it was bad, but
not at all.
And you're not how many millions of people around the world are watching this episode? There will be a percentage, maybe not a massive percentage, but a percentage who, for similar reasons, will come at it, because we all bring our own stuff to whatever we watch. So someone like yourself who's bringing your stuff to it is probably going to have the reaction that you had. And it's not even a knock on the episode, but it does mean that the episode, some people just will not be able to fully immerse themselves in it, to be honest with you, just for their own self-protection, which is perfectly justifiable. It reminds me a little bit of what you said. I remember reading, Roger Ebert, the old movie reviews, passed away now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. His review of Aliens, the Cameron one, he said something similar to what you said. I don't know if he was bringing personal baggage to it, but he said, this film was really good, and I really didn't enjoy it at all. He said, I wanted it to end. I found it a really unpleasurable experience, and I'm not critical of anything James Cameron did. He made a really good movie, I can totally acknowledge that, but I did not enjoy sitting for a minute there, and I was kind of glad when it was done.
Yep, I can relate to that 100%.
Okay, Jonathan, we moved to what from this you liked the least? I'm guessing there's not much.
Sticking on the theme of the child in the episode, Splice, I couldn't work out, because the actress is clearly 10, 11, something like that, at that age, but the characters written like more like the 5 or 6. I think they were grasping at concepts that, ignoring concepts that have already been mentioned, like the father dead and hologram and stuff like that, in a way that almost reminded me more of like a 5 or 6 year old, or maybe even a little bit younger would. It was just a bit of a tonal, like, how old is she meant to be? And also the fact that, like Rick said, the fact that she's there in the first place. It's like, my dad had special dispensation to bring me to this planet.
I think it's because the mother's passed away, but it is very much a quick info dump because that's not what we're really focused on.
Yeah, so I didn't think that she was a very good actress as well, but mainly because they were getting her to act like under her age. Yeah, like the bit where she just started, photographs. It was like, okay, what's going on?
Yeah, when at the beginning, when he's talking to her on the comms and he's like, find Monday to put you to bed. I'm like, this kid's 12. She can go to bed on her own.
Yeah. Yeah, remind her to brush her teeth and stuff. It's like,
yeah. Well, the brushing teeth, that's legit.
Well, yeah, okay. Yeah.
But then the pictures, yeah, you're right. She was acting like a toddler with the pictures. And the fact that she was totally nonplussed by the fact that her father was dead, that was all really weird.
Yeah, I'm wondering if early drafts, and this isn't an excuse, by the way, because what we get is what we can't judge on what you might have done or what you intended to do, but I do wonder if in earlier drafts of the script there was something alluding to this kind of militaristic warmongering like atmosphere. If you grow up in that, it can infantilize you a little bit, or it can stunt development, because I agree she was very infantilized as a child, and you've already basically touched on what I like the least. So when the Doctor kind of gets not shot or kind of hit with that kind of taser gun that Mundy fires at him, and that's when the ambulance shows up, the whole combat detected thing, and that's kind of meant to be a huge oh shit moment in a series of oh shit moments, because we see in the pre-credit scene what the ambulance does, and that's the moment in the episode when Splice decides to look at some old family photos. I understand why it happens, because there's a bit where they're looking about, that's where we went to go see the antelopes, and the antelope is kind of a key word trigger for when Veta essentially saves everyone. It was almost like the scene was put in the wrong place in the episode. Like, it made little sense to show it at the moment when the ambulance is circling, and Ruby's got the idea to distract it with Mundy's gun, and then she gets shot herself. Why at this moment is Splice acting like everything happening around her just isn't happening? I know kids can be self-obsessed, but that does seem a little bit of a reach. That moment in the episode was just like, that doesn't make any sense. She doesn't even react or acknowledge anything else that's happening around her at that moment, where I just would, and obviously Rick's in a better position to tell us, but at that moment a kid's probably just looking around, bemused by everything, trying to make sense of everything, but not, oh, look at all these nice photos.
Yeah, no.
It jarred so much with everything else. It was just totally, in terms of just behaviour from a character, it made no sense when you put into context everything else that's happening around it. And it is, like, Jonathan, you said you didn't really think the actor was that great. I agree with you. Her, along with pretty much all the supporting cast, I didn't think were great. Maybe it's partly because I think both Ncuti and Millie were excellent in this episode. Those two were superb. I thought almost everything else around it was very flat, not very memorable, apart from the Susan twist as the ambulance. But I kind of think, we shouldn't just consider her a regular by this point, because she's been in pretty much every episode. And that scene didn't ruin the episode, but it caused it to lose an episode that had so much energy in it. It caused it to lose just a little bit of its energy. It's why I gave it a 7. I was bouncing between a 7 and an 8. And part of the reason I gave it a 7 is because from that moment to the end, but that moment in particular was just like, oh, this isn't as good. This isn't terrible. This isn't shit. I mean, good God, we've had so much worse Doctor Who than this. But I was like, you set a really high standard early on in that first half, and you just struggled. You just started to lose the thread a little bit. And that was the scene in particular. I was like, that's the only scene from the episode I was like, that wasn't good. That was just bad. Everything else was solid to tremendous. And that scene was the only, because it was the only rotten apple. Like, yeah, that was just not good at all. But if we move from that to the person responsible for all of what we're talking about, Stephen Moffat. So we've had now his first contribution since returning to the show, Jonathan. So just your thoughts on what's he done here, the fact that he's back, what kind of role he seems to be taking?
Well, he's back into that role of, I'm Stephen Moffat, I'm going to write the best stuff that's judged, because I hadn't actually seen the rest of it. But it's better than the stuff that came before it with Davis. You know, you got a solid Moffat effort, really good, really enjoyed it. And because he's not working on the entirety of the story, like the story arc. I think it was always really good in those focused episodes, like Doctor Dances and Blink and stuff like that. And he's just bringing the tension and horror and stuff back to Doctor Who in this role. And maybe that's what Davis is going to let him do. You know, maybe he's just going to be like, right, I'm going to write silly stuff, and I'll let Moffat handle the other stuff. I am seeing him more of a revisionist, almost history point of view of Moffat's tenure as well, coming up online. Yeah, I think he's just bringing it back in. He's just obviously taking his break, enjoying coming back and write more episodes like this, maybe. I don't know what the plan is.
Christmas for him. He's written the Christmas episode, which they filmed it. They've already filmed it.
Yeah, and I was just excited to see Moffat back last week as well, when it was like next episode written by Moffat. It's just a recognisable name that you know is probably going to bring quality in a one-off episode.
Yeah, I mean, we briefly spoke about Stephen Moffat, Rick, when you were on the preview pod. So, I mean, you've already said quite a bit in terms of the person who really struggled to kind of get on with the tone of this episode. I mean, was this slightly surprising, just given like what we've got from him in the past? You maybe not expecting to be like the edge to be as sharp as it was.
Well, that and I'm not really sure that the words Moffat and subtle were ever really in the same sentence, but this episode was so unsubtle. It was like, you are not going to miss the message of this episode at all, even if you're totally drunk and sleeping through half of it.
But a funny thing, someone you said online, is that the literal last image of the episode is a snowflake.
But still more subtle than the line about in Space Babies about no one cares about them, once a bod.
I was also a little surprised that Moffat... Okay, has anyone talked about the fact that this is not the first time the Doctor's been stuck on a landmine in an episode? Because it was Tom Baker. I haven't been paying too much attention to the surrounding fan stuff this semester. This year, this season. We just finished I just had commencement on Sunday, so I'm finally decompressing from the school year. And it's like, wait a minute. Wasn't there another episode with the Doctor and a landmine? And it only took me like 10 seconds of searching. It was a Tom Baker episode. It was one of the ones with Harry and Sarah and the fourth Doctor, and they were in a quarry, and then he steps on one. It wasn't the whole episode, but it was just like, we've been down this road before. I don't know if it was an accident or an homage or just no one's going to remember. Let's do this.
Emma mentioned there was a lot of references going in this episode as well.
Oh, his old stuff, yeah, good God. The most interesting thing, I mean, this episode for me felt as much as a writing exercise. I guess kind of teaching creative writing class of your character can only be in one spot for like 45 minutes and you have to write a dramatic scenario around that. It was almost like put the Doctor in one spot, they can't move, throw obstacle after obstacle at them, and then let's see what happens. And from the behind the scenes stuff that we here in the UK are more privileged to get, Moffat does kind of seem, and maybe it was unofficial last time around, but it feels as close to official without it being official that he basically is RTD's number 2, because he did a lot of the press and build up to this episode. Moffat did a lot of interviews. One of them he spoke about he was leading the tone meetings. It's kind of the production of the episode. For this episode, Moffat was in that meeting, not Davis. He was on set more than Davis for this episode. And who else on this planet would Davis give that kind of freedom to? And it was like a hostile takeover. I think Davis said the third phone call he made when he agreed to come back was to Moffat. I cannot imagine anyone else writing for him would be allowed, and understandably would be allowed to do that. And it does feel that long-time friends, he knows Moffat understands the law, he knows Moffat knows how to do this job, so it's very much of, look, Stephen, you know what you're going to do, go in the meetings, be on set, I trust you to handle it. I can maybe actually focus my attention more on other stuff. And as I said, Moffat's writing Christmas. When was the last time the non-showrunner wrote the Christmas episode? That's never happened. And I have no problem for the record with his decision, but it kind of says that Moffat has a very privileged position. He seems to have all the benefits, none of the drawbacks, because if it goes wrong, it's on Davis, not on him. In a way, and I don't begrudge him this, I understand why he's been given this, but he does seem to have just a dream job right now, where he gets to write for Doctor Who without a lot of the burden that you do have as a showrunner. Props to him, because this episode actually felt more like Moffat era rather than Moffat writing for RTD era. This felt more like the kind of thing that I would see in when he was the showrunner himself, rather than when he was writing and Davis was the showrunner. I don't know if a writer has been given as much freedom on a Doctor Who adventure as Stephen Moffat has been given, and the way this has been received, it may not be the last time.
He's down as an executive producer in the episode.
Yes, he is. I'm not sure if that's ever happened before. And there's some interesting things, like he mentioned how particularly when Ncuti gets really angry, if you look at the dialogue and like detach it from the actor, you're like, oh yeah, this is very much Capaldi era. Like, this could have been a Capaldi era story, and maybe it was one that he had an idea for and just never wrote it. So much of it's like, oh yeah, I can imagine Peter Capaldi saying these lines. And it's to Ncuti's credit that it didn't feel out of place coming out of his mouth. And also, maybe to your point, Rick, about how harsh this episode felt, maybe that's also partly, it feels like it was written for a Doctor who's very comfortable in that realm. And you have like an episode, like he did the Empty Child Doctor Dances, was a lot about the power of motherhood, and this one's more about power of fatherhood. Like, it was worth talking about him here because of, I've never seen this on Doctor Who. I don't mean the actual episode, but how it was all put together, the freedom he was given. It was almost like you could be showrunner for this episode and go right ahead and it's fine. And because I've got other episodes to work on, so I don't need to worry about Boom, because I know you've got it in hand. Who knows what happened? I guess we'll find out later with the Christmas episode, given that he's written that one as well. And maybe this is part of the reason, because Davis has spoken about how burned out he was first time round, and this is him a bit more experienced and a bit more wiser and thinking, are there ways I can conserve energy without it affecting the show? I can know the train will stay on the track because I can give him the wheel for a little bit, and I can focus my energy more rather than spreading myself too thin and being pulled 3 different directions. Well, it makes total sense. This is kind of more an interesting from a production and showrunning standpoint rather than storytelling. Jonathan, do you have any other observations that we've missed that we haven't mentioned yet?
As a person that did military history and actually did my dissertation on war films at one point, there's a long running, obviously you want to keep everyone in one area, have someone stand on a landmine, instantly creates tension because everyone can understand that, especially when you add lights to it. So there's a couple of films, there's the British, which I'm sure probably didn't have an influence on, but it's like Kajaki, which is a British one about Afghanistan, and then way back, I think it's Bosnian or Serbian, or it might be a co-production called No Man's Land, which again is a very similar premise, except that it's actually 2 enemies, that there's a Serb and a Croat. I think one of the other opposition sides in that war, there were so many of them, it's hard to remember exactly which one to concentrate on where they're stuck. And it's just a trope that really helps cement tension, and I do wonder if it had a little bit of influence. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is, I didn't know this until I was watching What Culture's ups and downs of this episode, is that all the backdrops are not green screen. Can't remember the name that they used for it, but it's basically just giant projector screens that they just project on, and so the actors can actually see what backdrop they're acting against as well, which is interesting.
Is it the volume, the same like the LED stuff?
It's actually not. That's what I thought. Davis was very clear to me. No, it's not the volume. I think the volume, I think, is 360.
So what you were saying about the screen, I think what's worth to explain to people is, a lot of people say to me, are you using the volume? You know, your Star Wars shows are shot on the volume, and this isn't quite, is it? This is a screen, a single. The volume is it goes all at 360 degrees. This is a screen, a huge screen. I'd love to have a television that big, I've got to say.
Oh yes, it was massive. It's the size of a studio wall.
Yeah.
It was utterly huge. And every time you see the sky, except if the sky's in focus in the shot and you can see across the battlefield, that's not really there. That's a giant screen every single time. It's quite, and you know, if you could stand there and look at it in real life and think it was real.
Yes, that is amazing, isn't it?
And then the camera moves and you feel sick.
Yeah,
that's quite. I mean, Phil's done a lot of that on Doctor Who, though, isn't he? A lot of the sets you go in and you just suddenly get that sense, the smell and the space as well.
Yeah, Phil Sims, on his way, he's the best designer.
For the sets, you often go in and you're like, just feel it, you know. And what's most interesting is standing in there, seeing that world behind and in the set. Is double hit.
Yeah.
But the term, I think, the best term for it is IC VFX. And so it's VFX, which is visual effects, obviously, but IC is in camera.
Right.
So it's the simplest way to is IC VFX.
And that is the thing. I'm not conveying this properly. On the day of shooting that, but I sent it. I phoned it and sent it to you. To look at this on the monitor live.
Amazing.
You could actually see that moment where the camera zooms towards the police box and the police box doors open, and you see it bigger on the inside in real time, actually in front of you.
It's interesting that even with the more money and a bit more effects and stuff, that they do appear to be trying to be as like tactile and physical with it as possible. They're not trying to do like Doctor Who via AI. Rick, sorry, there's one point you wanted to make, I know in particular.
This doesn't even rise to the level of theory. It's just a feeling I've got, and I haven't heard anyone say anything along these lines. So I might just be talking out of my exhaust port. But sometime during the first 2 episodes, I think it was especially in Space Babies, because it was just so utterly ridiculous, even for Doctor Who. I guess I should, full disclosure, I didn't care for the first 2 at all. Everybody in them did a great job, but I just didn't like the episodes. I get the feeling like, not a Bobby Dallas waking up and the entire season didn't happen thing, but I feel like what we're seeing is not what's really happening, if that makes any sense. Like maybe we're in the Doctor's head or something. You know, ever since the split, what tore him apart and had David Tennant go off to have tea with Donna's family forever, and now Ncuti's out crying every 30 seconds. And I know that when y'all were talking about the Devil's Cord, it came up that people online were pissed off that the Doctor was a coward now.
Which we should say on the pod, we refuted that on the pod, but no, some people online have said that.
Yeah, that's a word that's out there. Mm-hmm. I don't say that because I don't think that at all. But I did say to my wife at one point during the Devil's Cord, scared Doctor doesn't work for me. That's not a condemnation. I like the Doctor when they are, even if it's not the right course of action, they've always been decisive. And scared Doctor, when scared doesn't really seem to be appropriate yet, hasn't been working for me. But if it's a result of the sundering of the 2 Doctors, you know, almost like Star Trek where when Kirk was made into 2 people and evil Kirk was the strength and good Kirk was the compassion, but neither of them could work without the other. If that's kind of where they're going with something like that, I'm down for it. But right now, I'm really confused about who the Doctor is, because there's a lot of just really odd emotional reactions coming from the Doctor that I'm really not used to seeing, and which is totally groovy. I'm all for shake the boat and make things different. But right now, I don't feel like these emotional beats are earned. And so I'm hoping that it's leading to something that will bring it all together.
I'm wondering how much of that might be leading to some kind of plot explanation, or some of it is just they're consciously doing it differently. And they're consciously doing the character differently. There is, you wouldn't have seen this, but in the episode commentary for the Christmas episode,
This is what Ncuti, this is the newest thing he brings to the Doctor, I think, which is to be so emotional.
Yeah.
Which I love.
Oh, it's amazing.
I do.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic.
Because he plays it so well, because it's almost like someone's inside of him fighting those emotions through, and he's trying to hold them back. And it's his humanity.
It's almost like he's crying independently of his thought process.
Yeah. And it's like, no, what am I doing?
Yeah. I was arguing with the writer the other day. It was kind of going, not arguing, but with the writer saying the Doctor wouldn't do that. And I was going, no, this Doctor does.
Yeah.
Look at him. It's like he's so much more full of, and I love it.
Yeah.
And let me just clarify. I'm not saying I have a problem with the Doctor crying, but it seems to be very odd moments when he starts crying.
This Doctor is very more openly emotional than any before. The Moffat joke about in the 50th anniversary about there being like all this kissing, it does seem to happen a lot. I have a feeling that someone will say the similar thing about this era and crying. Yeah, this Doctor's probably shed more tears in 4 episodes than every other Doctor
combined.
Yeah, maybe combined. I mean, in this, I think it was a case of being scared of dying, and then believing in the moment that Ruby was dead. What I would agree is that usually the Doctor does not go very emotional until they're really pushed, and often they're pushed really hard. That hasn't been the case here. We'll see whether there is a plot explanation for that. My suspicion, and like you said, you don't know for sure, I don't know for sure. We're only going on trying to make a judgment on what we've seen so far. I think that's who this Doctor is, and I think they're thinking of a newer audience as well. like, I understand older fans. When I say older fans, I don't just mean you. I mean someone like me and Jonathan who, because we can't call ourselves new fans. It's been 20 years. It's 2 decades. We can't we can't call ourselves new fans anymore. But we're definitely not used to seeing a Doctor like this. I'm personally willing to give a lot of leeway as long as the episodes themselves are good. And I did think this was good. So I'm noticing it. It hasn't been lost on me. It's not something I have a problem with yet. But I would imagine that some fans like yourself, Rick, are very much, this Doctor does cry a lot, doesn't he? And one of the things you use about the Doctor actually represses quite a lot. And actually does hold a lot in. And I'm sure this Doctor has their secrets, every Doctor does, but this Doctor is doing it less. That might be the dint of them having done therapy the wrong way around. So now they have had an emotional breakthrough, hence their behaviour at times in what we've seen, in 4 episodes.
And the other reason I had this, we're not seeing the whole picture yet, was the snow.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, that's an ongoing mystery, as now is Ruby's age.
The next of kin part was because next of kin doesn't necessarily mean blood relative. If you put next of kin down on a Doctor's form, I imagine Ruby would have had her adopted mother. Yeah, Carla down. And we've also got appearance of future companions.
Oh yeah, we haven't even mentioned that.
Which again went totally off my head.
It took me about 10 minutes. I was like, no, where do I recognise her? I know her. Would I know her? Where I know her from? And because she looks so different in all the photos that fans have been taking on the exterior shots or the official publicity photos, because she looks a bit different. Her hair looks different. There was a wait, who's that? And then after him, I was like, yeah, I know that is. That's Varada Setu, who will be an addition to Team TARDIS next year.
But not as Monday Flynn.
We don't believe so, no. We think this might be something a bit of like Clara there, where we saw Clara died, and then we saw Clara again, but not the Clara we saw the first time. I mean, even though we have precedent with Karen Gillan and Freema Agyeman, they were both in the show before reappearing as companions. But the show has officially, yes, acknowledged that, like, hey, look, it is everyone. You'll see her again. So we are getting to see her on set, her acting alongside Billy, alongside Ncuti. We'll look back on some of the interactions between her and Ncuti, just as 2 acting performances, because their characters, for the most part, are in conflict. I do think Ncuti does give a very good disdainful look, and he gave her quite a few disdainful looks throughout the episode. And because when I realised it was her, I'm now kind of watching it in the context of, what's this leading to? Because I'm expecting it to lead to something. So when you have the scene near the end, where one of the clergy, so Canterbury Oliphant, dies, the guy that shot Ruby, when he dies, and then he has a hologram and he says to Mundy, "You're my favourite person," and she's getting emotional, and it does cut to Ncuti looking at her and seeing what she's going through, and just that's one of those kind of reaction shots that you're like, that could add a little bit more depth to when these two meet again, even if it's a different character. There would be some acknowledgement of, at the very least, you remind me of someone I met once. So I think that in the editing process, that's kind of like, we need a reaction shot of Ncuti here, so make sure we get that, because Varada Setu said,
just been announced as the new companion officially, which is very exciting. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yes. But we filmed before together over a year ago for episode 3, Boom. Mm-hmm. Now, when we did that interview, you wouldn't have known that this would happen.
Oh, no. I was just in it for the ride. I had a great time for those 3 weeks, and it was just like, I was devastated to be leaving because I had so much fun. But, I didn't know anything about it. That call came much later, months and months later.
So how that is all going to fit together, we'll see. The only other little things that stood out that we haven't mentioned yet was another kind of timely news story, AI in this, and AI kind of being used to, shall we say, exploit the worst aspects of humanity. Another thing I'm noticing is, and this actually, when we analyse, we kind of have to judge things as they are rather than a prearranged agenda. We got the Chris Chibnall credit for this, because this was something that was in Chibnall's era quite a lot. The idea of organisations and institutions running out of money or having no money, because the algorithm in the pre-credit sequence, there's like, the algorithm's outdated, hasn't it? It's like, no, they didn't have money for that. And then the spaceship in Space Babies, the space station, also the reason why the rest of the crew deserted it, because it ran out of money, and even though it was still birthing babies. That seems to be a theme, which also actually very, very timely.
Wonder why that's all on their minds at the minute.
Yeah.
14 years of Tory rule.
One interesting thing is the killing of Vader in the pre-credit sequence, because he's visually impaired. The ambulance decreasing blind and says the recovery period takes too long, so we're going to kill you. That's something I only found this actually about from disabled people themselves, who I did some work with. That's what's called the medical model of disability. There's the medical model and the social model. And the medical model essentially says that if you have a disability, then you are broken, you are a problem, you are inferior, less than. I mean, quite a fascist way of looking at disabled people. And the social model is more, the problem isn't the person who's disabled, but the way society is constructed around them. So if you look at things through the social model of disability, that's why, for example, I don't know how it is in Florida or America, Rick, but like here, I think all government buildings by law have to have ramp access, so you can access the building if you're in a wheelchair.
Yeah, we have the Americans with Disabilities Act that there's supposed to be accessibility in all government buildings and most public buildings, whether they're government or not. The level to which such things are enforced is variable depending on where you live. The level to which, like, okay, there's tons of loopholes, and if it's similar in England, then there is even more, because like my theater is terrible for accessibility, but it was built in 1973 before the ADA went into effect, so it's grandfathered in, and older buildings get this special dispensation as long as they don't remodel beyond a certain point. And so a lot of places will ride the edge of, if we upgrade too much, then we're going to have to make this building ADA compliant, and that's going to cost millions.
I don't think it's probably that too different here. I think government buildings.
The main difference is we wouldn't consider a building built in the 1970s as historically.
Good God, no.
No.
Yeah, castles, yes, buildings.
But yeah, and that's the thing. The medical model is, well, the problem isn't us. The problem is those people on crutches or in wheelchairs or people who are blind or whatever. Where the social model says, no, the problem is the way society's constructed, so we should change that. And let's just say that these ambulances of Villengard definitely have a medical model of disability put into their programming.
Well, what's interesting, it makes sense that the fact that, there is no bad guys, apart from the algorithm is
although the ambulances were really Dalek-like.
Yeah, true, yeah. Is that in the real world, landmines are absolutely horrible and disgusting because they're actually designed to put people in hospital and not to kill them, because then it leaches the resources off the opposing country. Whereas in this situation, obviously they're not, because you are the opposing force.
That goes back to Napoleon and his wooden bullets.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just quick, another thing on Splice, another damaged orphan child in terms of themes. In terms of themes in this series, we are now, 4 for 4, I think?
Falling on the orphans.
There's a lot of children who are going to need some serious therapy. Well, it's not the doctor's fault, but I've come across this doctor so far. Okay, Jonathan, so who's your MVP for this episode?
I'm going with Moffat, just for bringing this kind of story back to Doctor Who in a way that I enjoyed.
And Rick, who's your MVP?
Millie Gibson. I am really enjoying her. She's a ray of sunshine in one of the bleakest Doctor Who episodes I've ever seen.
Oh, and also, because we didn't, I mean, even though I think most people, I'm sure if you listen to this, but we did a pod a while back when the rumours were going around that she might be leaving after one series and she fell out with everyone and was a diva and all that shit. And subsequently, David was like, that's bollocks, that's not happening. She is staying, at least for another year.
Oh, good. I didn't hear that part.
Yeah, no, this is not a final series.
Okay, good.
All right, I missed that.
In 2025, she'll be in the show in 2025. I think a little bit less, and I think this is maybe where Verida Setu comes in. And I suspect there won't be as much Ruby once the mystery of her, which we'll find out in about a month is revealed. But she's not gone from the show. She has signed on to do kind of a masterpiece PBS style costume drama. I mean, what I was saying about Davis, maybe learning from last time, I think they have built into how they're putting the show in. Everyone doesn't have to go 100 miles an hour and just then hit a wall and collapse. I think they are trying to build in, even in the filming blocks, of like, okay, we'll film for like 8 weeks, and then everyone can go on holiday for like 2 weeks, and then come back, and then we go again to finish. But there has been breaks. If you have seen like Shooty or Millie's Instagrams, I guess Farada Setu now, we've got to keep an eye on her as well. There has been like, I think a few breaks where there's time for them to work on other stuff. Because before, in the old days, like Tennant and Smith, you'd barely see them in anything, or Karen Gillan. They might be able to do one other project, but if they're working on Doctor Who, they were filming Doctor Who and nothing else. And I think it probably helps in terms of retaining cast members and bringing cast members in, that look, you won't just have to be in this show forever, and you can, just as an actor, do other things if you get offered other good work and creatively like stretch yourself. So you just don't have to be in the TARDIS the whole time. But yes, Millie Gibson, I'm totally with you. I mean, I liked her immediately, and I'm very happy this will not be the only year we get of her. My MVP is Tim Hodges. Who is Tim Hodges? He is the editor of this episode, because part of why I like this was the editing. I think the editing is first rate. Bits of the editing, so particularly when you're going through Shooty's mindset or him reacting to stuff, it felt, I think in a good way, like one of the episodes of Sherlock, Moffat's episodes. Which again, it underscores that like he got a lot of creative freedom in this episode. But so much of what I enjoyed, and I think Jonathan enjoyed, and probably actually maybe, I don't know if that made it even worse for you, Rick, even though I'm sure it's the subject matter more than how they did it. But so much of that tension and drama does come from what Tim Hodges does. But for anyone who watches the episode, watch how like fast and sharp the cutting is from shot to shot. If you edit this differently, this episode is not bad by any stretch, but nowhere near as tense as it was. And moments of, you cut to the landmine, you see the green start to tick up, cut back to Shooty, cut back to the landmine, cut to Ruby. I hope it was shot by Julian Robinson as well, very good. But how it was edited, I thought was like, this is what's really making this work for me. Like, I gave it a 7. This was kind of a high 7. This was very close to being an 8. And part of the reason why is actually Tim Hodges, and because I can't imagine we'll mention him again on this show, I did want to make sure he got a mention because the quality of his work deserved it. That said, I'm stunned none of us went for Shooty because I thought he was tremendous as well.
He was, yeah.
I kind of always feel like it's a cop-out to give him the MVP or to give the Doctor the MVP.
He is kind of the quarterback. It is like every Super Bowl. The quarterback always gets the MVP, and it's like, you had a shit game.
Yeah.
You weren't the best player on the field today. But Shooty was tremendous, and he has some stuff where it's like, not that I thought he couldn't do it, but I'm like, oh, okay, so you can do those things as well. You've got some really good breadth as an actor. But yeah, MVP is Tim Hodges.
We've established I didn't like this episode, not because it was bad, but because it was for reasons. I can appreciate what you're talking about with the editing, because before we got too far into the episode, and he stepped on the landmine, I'm like, oh, God, this whole thing is going to be him standing on that. This is going to be tedious AF. And it was anything but. So while I didn't enjoy the episode, I can totally appreciate what you're talking about with how the editing, the pacing was great. It never felt, I kept wanting to, like, oh, good, are they going to finally get him off of this thing? And then it's like, no, that's the point of this episode, is he's on that damn thing for the entire episode, which was part of the uncomfortableness of it, which is the goal of this episode was to make us uncomfortable, and boy, did it work. So I totally appreciate what you're talking about with the editing.
Is an important thing that we do here is that we also have to obviously analyze craft, because craft that underpins story, and it's story that then underpins how we feel about the story. And yeah, the craft of everyone, because that is a tough exercise of like, right, you've got to stay there for like pretty much 45 minutes and you can't move. Yeah, that is asking, that can so easily be dull. And the fact that it didn't drag, that 45 minutes went by so quick. And that is down to the craft of everyone involved, that you take that premise that if you don't get it right, it's going to be so boring, and actually make it dramatic, and however you felt about it, we all felt some way about it. Okay, so listeners, if you have any thoughts on what you've just heard from us, you can email us at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com. That's analysing spelled with an S. And we can be reached on Twitter at analysingdw. So Rick, Jonathan, thank you for both being here.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening. We'll be back next week to analyse 73 yards. Until next time.